In this lesson, we're going to review the offset formula in detail and combine it with other Excel formula to be able to generate instructions to Excel that are automated and dynamic. So let's review the typical use case of the offset formula. The offset formula is automatically generated if you use the relative reference option while recording the macro code. This is used by VBA to instruct Excel to navigate from one cell to another to fulfill a simple set of instructions. The offset formula has different components that the user can link with other Excel formula so that the macro code generated in VBA can be edited. You can use the offset formula when manually coding to make the use of dynamic features that comes with it. Now we're going to look at each component of the offset formula. We will share some of the examples where you can use the offset formula. We believe that through our lesson, once you understand how the formula works, you'll be able to customize the code as per your own specific needs. Most of the scenarios are typically the same that include the use of index, match, and count A formulas to make formula automated. The first component of the offset formula is reference. The reference is the starting point of the offset formula. We will instruct Excel to search for a starting point, which can be any cell. This is used by VBA code as well when we want to specify a series of sub-procedures that occur one after the other. The second component of the offset formula is rows. Once you specify the starting point, you must instruct Excel towards the number of rows you want to move from the starting point selected in the reference phase. The benefit of using the offset formula over other lookup formulas is that here you can instruct Excel to move both downward and upwards. You can use negative values if you want Excel to move upwards from the starting point. The third component of the offset function is COLS, meaning columns. You must instruct Excel the number of columns you want to move from the starting point. The benefit of using the offset formula over other lookup formulas is that you can instruct Excel to move both right and left. You can use negative values if you want Excel to move left from the starting point. The fourth component of the offset formula is height. This is an optional part of the code, and the code still works even if you don't input anything in this field. This part specifies the height of the lookup value. This means that if you start from a reference and move a set of rows or columns and reach your lookup cell, whether you want one cell value or a vertical range. If you select value as 1, it'll then return one cell reference. If you select multiple values, then the lookup will be on the range that's specified. We can also use negative values if our range lies above the lookup cell after navigating through the row numbers and column numbers. The last component of the offset formula is width. This is an optional part of the code, and the code still works even if you don't input anything in this field. This part specifies the width of the lookup value. This means that if you start from a reference and move a set of rows and columns and reach your lookup cell, whether you want one cell value or a horizontal range. If you select value as 1, it'll then return one cell reference. If you select multiple values, then it looks up the range that is specified. We can also use negative values if our range lies on the left of the lookup cell after navigating through the row numbers and column numbers. The height and width can also be used together if our range spans multiple height and width. We can use the offset formula together with the sum formula or any other mathematical formula and perform mathematical operation on a range specified in the height and width part of the offset formula. You can see that if we use the sum formula with the offset formula having a specific range, the result is that the sum formula sums all the values in the range instead of returning the full range as a table. We'll now discuss how we can use the rows and columns components of the offset formula with the match formula. We know that the rows and columns part is used to instruct Excel to move a certain number of rows and columns in a direction to reach the destination cell or range. However, this means that we have to first know exactly where our data is, and then we have to count the relevant number of rows and columns from our starting point, and then manually specify the number of rows and columns from the starting point. This makes the offset formula manual, and therefore we'll use the help of the match formula to automate the task of selecting the row and column number. The match formula is a lookup formula that looks up a value in a range and returns the number of rows or columns from the starting point of the data depending on the range specified. To elaborate, this means that if we have a range, either vertical or horizontal, we can use the match formula to find where our lookup value is within that range. We're discussing this here because we can now use the match formula in the rows and columns component of the offset formula so that we don't have to manually type the row and column number, but instead we can now link it to a lookup value. Let's use an example. Suppose we have two different database reports that have multiple columns in different order, but both have one column that's in common that we need. This column is the agent name. The first report has agent names in column B, and the second report has agent names in column C. We intend to copy the agent names column in column G, and then remove duplicates to extract unique agent names. If we record a macro code using relative reference on the first database, the code generated cannot be used if the database format changes and the column for the agent names changes. Let's review the code generated by using record macro technique. From the first line of code, we can see that it instructs Excel to move from the active cell A1 and go one column forward and then select the entire column. This means that the column B will be selected, which contains the agent names. The second line of code is the copy command. The third line of code is used because we now want to paste the column B on column G. Therefore, we'll move 5 columns forward. The fourth line of code is the paste command. The fifth line of code is the command to remove the copy command. The last line of code is the remove duplicates function to create unique agent names. Now we have another database report where the agent names are not in column B. Instead, they're in column C. If we want to use the same code to run on the second database report, we will not get the requisite results as the references in the code do not apply to the second database report. The result will be that the new claim type column will be copied as it is now in column B. This is where the match formula as a lookup formula will be useful. We will use the match formula with the offset formula so that instead of specifying the number of columns for our data, we will use the match formula to look for the agent name column and automatically return the column number in the offset formula. We will now not have to worry about where the agent column is located. Here is how the new code line looks as compared to the original one. We will now explain the difference in the codes, which are basically inclusion of application to input the match formula and range to specify the range in the VBA code. The changes are inside the column portion of the offset formula. The application instruction is to activate the Microsoft app, which then detects the match formula that is entered. The match formula is simple with the inclusion of range text in the code to define the range where Excel must look for the agent name. As we have selected the entire row, the return value will begin with cell A1, so we will always get one extra number that we want to deduct. The reasons for this are that we will use the offset with active cell as A1, so we don't need that one extra column. Moving forward, after the agent name column is automated for selection, we will instruct Excel to move 5 columns forward to reach column G. This is also a manual task and should be automated. We can use the match formula in a way that it moves to column G from any position. We can see that the distance of column G from the start is 7 columns. We can write the following formula so that the column range becomes dynamic. Let's now review and explain the difference in the codes. The initial code referred to the difference between column B and column G because that's where our agent names column was placed. Now, since we want to design a code that corresponds to the difference between column G and the agent names column wherever situated, we'll have to amend the code with a dynamic code. We will first find the column number of column G, which is 7. We will then find the column number of the agent name, which can vary, and therefore we'll use the match formula. We will then deduct both to find the difference in the column number. We've already explained the application and range syntax while explaining the first line of code. After pasting the agent names column on column G, we will use the remove duplicates function. However, the code syntax refers to a specific range instead of it selecting the entire column. We will have to amend the remove duplicates code to select the entire column instead of a specific range, so that if our database has more rows, the remove duplicates function selects those columns as well. We will now explain how to use the COUNTA function together with the offset function for further automation. In a previous lesson, we discussed the COUNTA formula and how it can be useful to automate our VBA code. We're now going to use and build on that example. Suppose we don't want to paste the unique agent names in column G. Instead, we want to paste it 4 columns forward from the last column of our database report. We want to do this to ensure that there is no overlap if our database report expands to the point that we have data in column G as well. The logic for the formula will be as follows. We want to count the number of columns that there are in the database report and then add 4 to the answer to get the value. We can use the COUNTA formula to calculate the total number of columns that contain data headers. We will then add 4 in the formula to get the dynamic column number from cell A1, and this will be used to paste our agent names. We're then going to amend the third line of code as follows. The 5 columns that we specified for Excel to move from agent column to column G is now replaced with 2 formulas, the COUNTA and match formula. We are using the COUNTA formula to count the number of columns that have data in the database report. Then we add 4 to it so that the data is always pasted 4 columns after the end of the database report. We will then use the match formula to find the current position of the agent column and calculate the column number difference for the offset formula. We will also have to amend the remove duplicate line of code because it gives a reference to column G and we want to make that dynamic. We will amend the formula as follows. We will change the instruction from active sheet to active cell. The active sheet range requires a specific range, whereas the active cell refers to the current cell that is active. In this case, since we will paste the copied columns on a column that is 4 columns forward with the last column of the database report, it will select that column because it'll be the current active column. We will now run the amended codes. This is how the result will look like. We have now successfully automated our cell reference to make the code more dynamic. You can see how useful the offset formula is to automate the VBA code instructions. You can freely paste any database report using this code, and it'll give you the results without resorting to manually amending the codes. Hey guys, thanks for watching this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe from you. And if you want to learn more about Microsoft Excel, check out these videos above. And don't forget to check out our website, commercecurve.com, where we have lots of in-depth finance and accounting courses available with full training workbooks. All of our courses come with complete workbooks of lessons, examples, pre-built financial models, and training video. Hope to see you there.